When I was a teenager, my parents kicked me out because of lies my brother spread about me. Years later, after abandoning me, they suddenly resurfaced, demanding money when they saw how successful I had become. I'm a 28-year-old woman with a twin brother, and despite being born together, we were treated like complete opposites growing up. My parents were convinced that my brother was destined for greatness, while I was labeled the black sheep simply because I preferred sports and socializing over academics. They constantly compared us, which crushed my confidence from an early age. Our birthday celebrations were a painful reminder of this favoritism. My brother had grand parties with friends, while I was treated as an afterthought. He could have sleepovers whenever he wanted, but I wasn't even allowed to bring a friend home. Honestly, I despised every moment of my childhood. The only person who genuinely cared about me was my grandmother. She would always bring me my favorite chocolates when she visited, and secretly slip me a few dollars so I could buy myself something nice. Over the years, the preference my parents showed for my brother escalated into outright emotional abuse against me. They openly mocked my grades, belittled my interests, and no matter how hard I tried, I was never good enough for them. Even though I excelled in sports, they forbade me from participating in any extracurricular activities, insisting that I should focus on studying just like my brother. I felt trapped, frustrated, and completely powerless. By the time I was a sophomore, their control over me became suffocating. One day, I got grounded for what they considered a major offense having Snapchat on my phone. Like any teenager, I had downloaded the app to stay connected with my friends, but to my parents, this was an unforgivable betrayal. They flew into a rage, trashing my room and screaming at me. Then, in a final act of dominance, they removed my bedroom door, telling me that as long as I lived under their roof, I would have no privacy. Instead of standing by me, my twin brother took full advantage of the toxic environment our parents created. He began weaponizing their favoritism, lying about me to make himself look better. If he stole something, he effortlessly shifted the blame onto me, and my parents, already predisposed to thinking the worst of me, believed every word he said. At school, he went even further, humiliating me in front of my friends and mocking my appearance. Despite his efforts, I had a solid group of friends because I was friendly and easy to talk to. My brother, on the other hand, struggled socially and resented me for it. He was introverted and awkward, and it infuriated him that I could make connections so effortlessly. This jealousy reached a breaking point on our 14th birthday, when none of his friends showed up to celebrate with him. I never found out why they didn't come, but while he spent the day alone, my friends took me out for ice cream, and I had a great time. That day, something inside him snapped. Fueled by resentment, he started spreading vicious rumors about me at school, painting me as a spoiled brat. But that wasn't enough for him. He escalated his lies to something far more disturbing. He told people that I was physically abusing him at home, twisting our family's favoritism to his advantage. To make his lies seem more believable, he went to horrifying lengths. He would deliberately punch himself, giving himself black eyes and bruises, then show up to school flaunting his self-inflicted injuries as proof of my supposed violence. Whenever our parents noticed his bruises, he would easily cover for himself, blaming innocent things like roughhousing with his friends or playing football. Meanwhile, his fabricated stories continued to spread, and I had no idea just how much damage he was doing to my reputation until it was too late. The lies behind my brother's fake bruises started to spread like wildfire, and before I knew it, people were buying into his twisted version of events. Whispers about me floated through the hallways, and even my closest friends began to look at me differently. At first, the changes were subtle. Friends, who used to greet me enthusiastically, started keeping their distance. Invitations to hang out became infrequent, and eventually, they stopped altogether. It was as if a switch had flipped, and suddenly, I was the outcast, the girl nobody wanted to be associated with because of the awful things they believed I had done. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled aside my former best friend and asked her what was going on. She hesitated at first, but then admitted that my twin brother had been spreading horrible rumors about me. He had told everyone these elaborate, vicious lies, things I had never done, things I would never even think of doing. The weight of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. My own brother, someone I had grown up with, had been systematically destroying my reputation. It was a betrayal so deep it made my stomach twist. The next day, after school, I confronted him. I demanded to know why he was doing this, pleaded with him to stop, but instead of feeling any remorse, he just smirked at me. His words were cold. She told me I deserved to rot alone. I stood there, speechless. The realization sank in. My own twin brother wasn't just lying about Mehe wanted to ruin me. I considered going to my parents, but deep down, I knew they would take his side without a second thought. The isolation cut deep. I had always been someone who loved making friends, who thrived on connection, and now, thanks to my brother's jealousy-fueled lies, everything I had built was crumbling. Even my teachers started looking at me differently. Then, the situation escalated beyond teenage gossip. It reached the principal. The rumors had gained so much traction that they landed in his office, and before I could even process what was happening, my worst nightmare unfolded. One afternoon, I was summoned to the principal's office, where my brother and parents were already waiting. The principal, his expression serious, demanded an explanation for the allegations against me. I held on to the hope that my brother would finally admit the truth, but instead, he doubled down, spinning an even darker version of his fabricated story. With a straight face, he told the principal that the rumors were true, that I had been physically abusing him at home out of jealousy. I sat there, frozen in shock, as my brother crafted lie after lie. He painted himself as the victim, saying I resented him because our parents loved him more. It was all complete nonsense, but he never wavered, sticking to his story with chilling conviction. My mother immediately burst into tears, clutching my brother like he was some kind of wounded soldier. My father, furious, reassured him that he was brave for speaking up and promised that he would never have to suffer again. Meanwhile, I sat there drowning, unable to make them see the truth. Desperately, I tried to defend myself, pleading with the principal to see through my brother's deception, but my words fell on deaf ears. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, struggling to prove my innocence while my brother's lies tightened around me like a noose. The principal didn't hesitate and reprimanded me harshly, saying that bullying had no place in the school. Then came the final blow. He announced that I would be suspended for 10 days to set an example for others. I broke down, sobbing, begging him to reconsider. I hadn't done anything wrong, but he just shook his head, unmoved by my desperation. Tears streamed down my face as I pleaded for someone to believe me. But the decision had been made. Humiliated and furious, my parents yanked me out of the office. I didn't want to leave, I wanted to fight, to prove that my brother was lying, but they wouldn't let me. We left the school, my heart pounding with frustration, rage, and disbelief. But the nightmare wasn't over. When we got home, my father walked straight to my room and started packing my things. I stood there, stunned, watching him shove my clothes into a suitcase without a word. My mother, confused, asked him what he was doing. His response was cold, and finale couldn't allow me to stay in the same house as my brother any longer. I fell to my knees, sobbing, pleading with my brother to tell them the truth. But he just stood there, watching me break apart, completely unmoved. Then, my father grabbed my suitcase, marched to the foyer, and tossed it down. Desperate, I clung to his legs, crying, begging him not to throw me out. It felt like my worst nightmare was unfolding right in front of me. My father stood over me, his voice cold and detached as he told me that bullies like me didn't deserve to live under his roof. He made it clear that if my grandmother wanted to take me in, she could, but I was no longer welcome in their home. I was frozen in place, my heart pounding as my belongings lay scattered across the foyer. I had just been kicked out of my own house. Eventually, my grandmother arrived. She helped me gather my things, loading them into her car before gently guiding me into the passenger seat. As she made sure my seatbelt was fastened, I could see the fury in her eyes. She wasn't going to let this go. Without hesitation, she marched up to my parents' front door and rang the bell. The moment my father opened it, she let loose, yelling at him for throwing his own daughter out like she was nothing. She warned him that if he ever tried to contact me or interfere in my life again, she wouldn't hesitate to get the police or CPS involved. She made it clear that what he had done abandoning a child like this could very well land him in jail. My mother, trying to shift the blame, weakly defended their actions, saying it was all my fault. But my grandmother wasn't having any of it. She stood her ground, unwavering, reminding them that I was still just a kid who didn't deserve to be treated so cruelly. For the first time in my life, I saw just how powerful my grandmother was. She didn't cower in front of my parents, and unlike them, she believed in me. We drove away, leaving behind the house I had grown up in, the only home I had ever known. The pain I felt in that moment was indescribable. That night, I curled up on my grandmother's guest bed, sobbing silently. No matter how much she tried to comfort me or convince me to eat something, I couldn't. I told her everything: how my brother had lied, how he had ruined my life, and even she was stunned by how far he had gone. But she assured me that she believed me. And for the first time, in what felt like forever, I felt like I had someone on my side. When my 10-day suspension ended, the thought of returning to school filled me with dread. Walking back into those hallways was like stepping into a battlefield. The whispers hadn't stopped. The judgmental stares followed me everywhere. My brother continued to act like I didn't exist, surrounding himself with the people who believed his lies and saw him as the victim. No matter how hard I tried to set the record straight, it was pointless. No one wanted to listen. I had been branded with a reputation I couldn't shake. It followed me like a shadow, lurking in every classroom, every cafeteria table, every corridor. I became a ghost, keeping my head down, sitting alone at lunch, going straight home after school. I had no friends left, and it was painfully clear that nobody wanted me there. Through it all, my parents never once reached out to check on me. Not a single phone call, not a single word. The only person who reminded me that none of this was my fault was my grandmother. She constantly reassured me that things would get better, that life had more to offer than this miserable chapter. Despite everything, I managed to graduate high school with good grades and was eager to start college, hoping for a fresh start. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood what freedom felt like. No one was watching over my shoulder. No one was comparing my achievements to my brother's. No one was trying to put me down. I was just me. I made friends, real friends, people who liked me for who I was. Even though the scars of my past were still there, I was determined to move forward and enjoy my time in college. During those years, I discovered my passion for writing. I had always dreamed of becoming a writer, but growing up, I never thought it would be a realistic career choice. However, in an attempt to make some extra money, I decided to try freelance content writing. I signed up on different freelancing platforms, slowly building a portfolio and landing jobs with various clients. At first, it was just a side hustle to help me stay afloat, but over time, I realized that I was actually good at it. By the time I graduated, I had built strong professional relationships with multiple clients who kept bringing me onto their projects. Instead of chasing a traditional corporate job, I decided to take a leap of faith and pursue content writing full-time, and it worked. Not only did my freelancing career provide me with financial independence, but it also allowed me to travel. Becoming a digital nomad helped me heal in ways I never thought possible. I saved up as much as I could and bet on myself. It wasn't easy, but I pushed forward. Over the years, I've traveled to places I once only dreamed of, and yet I know there's still so much more to see. Through all of it, the only person I ever considered my true family was my grandmother. I adored her. She was the one who had saved me when no one else would. When I finally moved out to live life on my own terms, she was sad to see me go, but she understood. She knew I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. And no matter how busy my life became, I always made sure to keep in touch, because she was the only person who had ever truly been there for me. I always made sure to be there for my grandmother whenever I could. On weekends, I'd visit her, and we'd share meals, sit on the porch, and have long conversations that ranged from childhood stories to whatever was happening in our lives. Sometimes, I'd spend entire afternoons helping her with chores or accompanying her on peaceful walks through the park. Recently, I had the opportunity to work on one of the biggest projects of my career. While I can't disclose the brand, I was fortunate enough to write blogs and product descriptions for them. After completing the project, I asked the team I worked with to leave positive reviews on my website, and they were more than happy to do so. Feeling proud of my accomplishment, I took screenshots of some of their reviews and shared them on Instagram. Since this collaboration was a huge milestone for me, it caught the attention of other content writers who congratulated me on my success. Many even reshared my post, spreading the word further. Soon, I started receiving messages from strangers asking for help with their websites. Even some of my relatives took notice and reached out to express their admiration. Not long after, I received a message from my college principal. He had seen how well I was doing and invited me back to speak at a seminar about building a career as a content writer. Public speaking had never been my strong suit, and I was nervous, but I decided to take the opportunity. Standing in front of eager students, sharing my journey, it felt like my life had come full circle. I spoke about the struggles I had faced and how I had worked tirelessly to build a career despite all the obstacles. It was an incredibly rewarding experience to inspire and uplift aspiring writers, and I never expected the impact it would have. Clips from my speech started going viral on Facebook writing groups, resonating with people who had faced similar struggles. Then, last week, I was invited to speak on a local news channel. The show focused on the benefits of content writing, and they wanted me to share my journey and insights. While I was nervous, I was also excited about the opportunity. During the segment, I spoke about the importance of client reviews, how appreciation posts can open doors, and how freelancing had given me the freedom to shape my own career. Being able to reach a broader audience and inspire others in the field was both humbling and exhilarating. When the interview aired, I posted a few clips on Instagram, feeling proud of how far I had come. That's when my relatives and cousins really took notice. Since my parents had never spoken about me to anyone, most of them had no idea that I had been working with major brands or getting invited to television shows. But now, word spread quickly throughout my extended family. I guess my interview must have reached my parents as well because a few days later I was working on another project when I noticed several missed calls from my mom. Seeing her name on my phone after so many years caught me completely off guard. At first, I hesitated, unsure of what to expect. But curiosity got the better of me, and I called her back. She picked up immediately. I asked if everything was okay, and to my surprise, she started congratulating me. Moments later, my dad chimed in, asking about my life and well-being. I answered their questions without much thought, still trying to wrap my head around the sudden interest. It wasn't until they brought up the topic of money that things became clear. They started probing about how much I was earning. When I brushed it off, saying it wasn't their concern, my dad insisted, claiming that we were family and I shouldn't feel shy about sharing my income. Then, my mom's tone shifted. She sighed, mentioning how hard life had become for them in recent years. That's when I realized where this conversation was heading. Mom, we're retired now, and we've been wanting to renovate the house for a while. It's in bad shape, but we just don't have the savings anymore. Me, okay? Mom, after watching your television interview, we thought maybe you could help us out by paying for the renovations. Dad, after all, we're family. You shouldn't hesitate to share some of your earnings with us. We could really use your help. I let out a bitter laugh. Me, are you joking? You ignored me for years, didn't care if I was alive or dead, and now you suddenly want my help because I'm successful. While I appreciate the congratulations, I'm not giving you a single cent. Hearing my refusal, my mother immediately lashed out, calling me selfish and ungrateful, insisting that it was my duty to support my family. My father quickly backed her up, claiming that as my parents, they were entitled to my help and that this was the least I could do for them after all they had done for me. Their audacity infuriated me, and I was ready to unload years of pent-up anger. But then, a better idea struck me. Why waste time arguing when I could teach them a lesson they'd never forget? I took a deep breath and told them that I would help in one condition. My father, intrigued, asked me what it was. Without hesitation, I laid it all out. If they wanted my financial support, they had to stand before our family and friends and publicly admit the truth. They had to acknowledge that my brother was the mastermind behind the cruel rumors that destroyed my reputation. They had to humiliate him the way they had humiliated me, believing his lies while casting me aside. I wanted them to take accountability, to finally recognize the pain they had caused. Silence. My father immediately began questioning why such a confession was necessary. My mother, attempting to smooth things over, suggested we discuss the matter privately, without dragging others into it. But I didn't budge. This wasn't negotiable. If they wanted anything from me, they needed to expose the truth. As the tension in the conversation escalated, my father raised his voice, trying to pull rank, emphasizing that he was my father and that I owed them my support. My mother, in a final desperate attempt, played the guilt card, reminding me of the years they had raised me. I laughed bitterly. I reminded them that they were the ones who had thrown me out like garbage, and it was my grandmother who had raised me, not them. Their frustration grew, but I stood my ground. If they wanted a relationship with me or my financial help, the truth needed to come out, and my brother needed to face the consequences of his actions. Since that conversation, my parents haven't stopped calling. They've been blowing up my phone nonstop, but I've ignored every single call. Honestly, I regret even picking up that first time. Update 1. It's been a whirlwind of a week since I last shared my story, and the outpouring of support has been overwhelming. It's reassuring to know that I'm not alone in this, and I'm grateful that so many people agree that I owe my parents nothing after what they put me through. The reason I even gave them such an impossible condition was simply knew they would never agree to it. They love my brother too much, and even if they finally realized he was lying all those years ago, they'd never throw him under the bus the way they did to me. Then, today, I received a text from my brother. Apparently, my refusal to answer my parents' calls had frustrated them enough that they went crying to him. His message read, "Hey sis, it's been a long time since I saw you, and I have to say, every day without you in my life has been great. I heard Mom and Dad reached out to you, and you gave them some insane ultimatum. You know they're never going to do that, right? They never loved you, and they never will. I admit I lied about you 15 years ago, but that was ages ago. Stop being so selfish and move on. You're unmarried and childless anyway, so why not do the right thing for once and help them with the renovations? Be a better daughter." Reading that message was like taking a dagger straight to the heart. The sheer audacity's complete dismissal of the years of pain and suffering I endured was infuriating. And then, to top it all off, he tried to guilt-trip me by bringing up the fact that I wasn't married or had children, as if that somehow made my existence less valuable. Fueled by frustration and the burning desire for justice, I realized it was time to take action. I was done being silent. I sat down and wrote a long email to my parents and extended family, exposing everything they had tried to bury. I detailed the abuse, the favoritism, the way my parents had treated me versus my brother. I laid out every lie my brother had spread, how it had ruined my life, and how they had kicked me to the curb without a second thought. Then, for the final blow, I attached a screenshot of my brother's textless confession, in his own words, admitting that he had lied all those years ago. I hit send. An hour later, my inbox exploded. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and as expected, all hell broke loose after that email. My family was in an uproar. Many of my relatives who had been completely unaware of the extent of the favoritism and abuse reached out to apologize, saying they had no idea what I had been through. Some of them admitted that they should have stepped in sooner, but at the very least, they now knew the truth. As for my parents and brother, their reactions were exactly what I expected. They flooded my phone with calls and texts, at first trying to defend themselves, then escalating to pure rage when they realized I wasn't backing down. The messages became more and more aggressive, even violent. That's when I decided I had had enough. I contacted a lawyer and had a cease and desist letter sent to them, warning that if they continued to harass me, they would face legal consequences. I guess that scared them straight, because ever since then I haven't heard a word from them. The only person whose opinion matters to Memi grandmother completely supported my decision. She reassured me that I did the right thing, and knowing that she's still by my side is all the validation I need. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I'm happy to say that my life is finally at peace. My content writing business has been thriving, and the invitations to speak at seminars and podcasts keep coming. It's surreal to think that I went from being cast aside by my own family to becoming a respected figure in my field. On a personal level, I'm closer to my grandmother than ever. I recently took a break from work just to spend time with her, and she's been teaching me all about gardening. There's something so peaceful about planting flowers and herbs, about nurturing something and watching it grow. The time I spend with her sharing meals, talking for hours, or simply enjoying each other's company has become something I deeply cherish. My parents have remained silent since they received the letter from my lawyer, and I hope it stays that way. Most importantly, I've started going to therapy. After years of burying my pain, I'm finally taking the steps to heal. I think this will be my last update for now. I don't know what the future holds. For the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful.